a forested cliff above the Black Sea, behind a fence that runs for miles, stands what might be the most expensive private home ever built. The investigators who counted it all up put the bill at over 100 billion rubles. That is about $1.35 billion. It has its own church, its own casino, its own underground ice hockey rink, its own vineyards, its own restricted coastline, and its own no-fly zone. And here is the strangest part of all. Officially, nobody seems to want it. The president of Russia says it is not his. One of his oldest friends says it is actually an unfinished hotel. And the whistleblower who first described it says he watched it being built for one man, Vladimir Putin. I have toured a lot of expensive homes on this channel, but never one that came with its own airspace, and never one with a billion-dollar question mark hanging over the front door. So today I am taking you to Cape Idokopas. We will walk through what is inside, follow the money that allegedly paid for it, and relive how a single YouTube video turned this secret into the most famous house in Russia. Stay with me, because this story ends with a message scribbled on a wall above a toilet, and trust me, it is worth the wait. First, let me set the scene. We are on Russia's Black Sea Riviera in the Krasnodar region, near a resort town called Gelendzhik. Drive south along the coast, past a little village called Praskovivka, and you reach a wooded headland called Cape Idokopas. This is where, around 2005, construction crews began work on what the paperwork described as a modest wellness center. What actually rose out of the forest was an Italianate palace of 17,691 square meters. According to the 2021 investigation by Alexei Navalny's Anti-Corruption Foundation, that makes it the largest private home in Russia, with more than 3 times the floor space of the White House. It was designed by an Italian architect, Lanfranco Cirillo, who styled it like an 18th-century royal residence and who was later granted Russian citizenship by presidential decree. But the building itself is almost the smallest part of the story. The same investigation claimed the surrounding estate covers an area 39 times the size of Monaco. That is roughly 7,000 hectares of forest, coastline, and vineyards. Much of it, the investigators reported, leased from Russia's Federal Security Service. You cannot drive up to this place. You cannot sail to it either, because the waters off the cape are closed to boats. And you cannot fly over it, because the sky above the estate is a designated no-fly zone. When environmental activists tried to simply walk in, back in 2011, they were detained by officers of the Federal Protective Service, the agency that guards Russia's most senior officials. For a house that officially belongs to no one, it is remarkably well protected. So what exactly do you get for 100 billion rubles? Since none of us will ever get past that fence, we have to rely on the leaked floor plans and purchase documents published by the investigators, and later on 4 hours of hidden camera footage filmed inside. Start at the gates, crowned with a golden double-headed eagle, and step into a grand Italianate palace finished in marble columns and gold leaf. The furniture came from a who's who of Italian luxury workshops. The chandeliers include pieces from Baccarat, the French crystal house that once lit the ballrooms of actual czars. There is a private theater, a lobby bar, a hookah lounge with silk cushions arranged around a dance pole, a casino room complete with slot machines, and then my favorite line item in the entire dossier, the aqua disco. Yes, that is a real thing. It is a sunken dance floor built around a fountain. Below ground, there is an ice rink, so the owner can play hockey in the middle of July. Outside, the grounds hold a greenhouse of 2,500 square meters, an amphitheater, a church, tea houses, and helipads. Carved into the mountain beneath the palace is a tunnel that runs down toward the sea with its own wine-tasting room along the way. The estate even makes its own wine, from vineyards planted right on the property. Upstairs, the hidden camera footage revealed 11 bedrooms, with the primary quarters alone sprawling across roughly 275 square meters. That is bigger than most family homes, and then there is the detail that broke the internet. Among the leaked shopping lists, investigators found Italian toilet brushes priced at around 700 euros each. 700 euros for a toilet brush. Remember that brush. It comes back at the end of our story. Now for the billion-dollar question. Who pays for something like this? The first answer arrived in December 2010 from a businessman named Sergei Kolesnikov. Kolesnikov had spent years arranging medical supply deals in St. Petersburg. and he wrote an open letter to then-President Dmitry Medvedev with an extraordinary claim. Roman Abramovich alone, he said, gave around $200 million. He said some of Russia's wealthiest businessmen had donated enormous sums for hospital equipment. And Kolesnikov stressed that the donors acted nobly, believing every ruble went to healthcare. But according to his account, roughly a third of the money was quietly skimmed into offshore accounts, and by 2007, about $500 million had piled up in Switzerland. Some of that money, he claimed, was funneled into a venture that insiders called Project South. It began as that modest wellness center on the Black Sea, and it kept growing and growing until it became the palace at Cape Idokopas. Kolesnikov estimated that by 2009, construction had already swallowed $1 billion, and he said the state quietly picked up the tab for the extras: a gas pipeline, new power lines, and a freshly paved mountain road. He compared the finished product to Peterhof, the summer palace that Peter the Great built to rival Versailles. The Kremlin dismissed the allegations as untrue, insisting Putin had no relationship to any palace on the Black Sea. Then, weeks later, photographs of the supposedly non-existent palace leaked onto a Russian whistleblowing website showing lavish, nearly finished interiors. And in 2011, the story took its first truly strange turn. The unfinished complex was suddenly sold to a billionaire named Alexander Ponomarenko for a reported $350 million. Market experts told the business paper Vedomosti that the assets might actually be worth around $20 million. So either the buyer overpaid 17 times over, or the price was never really the point. For a decade after that, the palace faded back into rumor. Then came January 2021. On the 17th, opposition politician Alexei Navalny flew home to Moscow and was arrested at passport control. 2 days later, his anti-corruption foundation pressed publish on a 2-hour film titled "A Palace for Putin," which called the estate, in their words, the world's biggest bribe. The film had drone shots of the palace. It had 3-dimensional renderings of the interiors, reconstructed from leaked blueprints. It had the floor plans, the furniture invoices, and yes, the toilet brush. Within 24 hours, the video had 20 million views. Within a week, 93 million. Today it stands at more than 130 million, making it one of the most watched pieces of investigative journalism ever produced. Tens of thousands of Russians took to the streets, and that €700 toilet brush became the unofficial mascot of the protests, with demonstrators waving golden toilet brushes above the crowds. 6 days after the film dropped, Putin personally responded, telling a group of university students that nothing listed there as his property belongs, or has ever belonged, to him or his close relatives. And then, 5 days after that, came the twist nobody saw coming. Arkady Rotenberg, a billionaire construction magnate and Putin's childhood judo sparring partner, stepped forward and declared that the palace was his. It was not a palace at all, he said. It was an unfinished apart hotel, and he planned to open it to paying guests within 2 or 3 years. So after a decade of denials, the mystery mansion finally had an owner and a business plan. All it took was the most watched expose in Russian history. So did it become a hotel? Which brings us to the final chapter. 3 years later, in 2024, the Anti-Corruption Foundation and the investigative outlet Proct obtained something nobody outside that fence was ever supposed to see. 4 hours of hidden camera footage filmed inside the finished palace by a person they would only describe as our brave agent. According to the investigators, not even close. It is still a palace, but it had been quietly redecorated. On the new blueprints, the bedrooms are now labeled apartments. The dining room has been promoted to restaurant. And the casino? The casino is gone. In its place stands a private chapel dedicated to Prince Vladimir, the medieval ruler who brought Christianity to the region 1,000 years ago, complete with a carved wooden seat that, in the Orthodox tradition, is reserved for a tsar. The hookah lounge with the dance pole has reportedly vanished too. The playful frescoes have been swapped for paintings of famous Russian military victories. And the upkeep? The foundation reported that subsidiaries of a state pipeline company pay around 660 million rubles a year, roughly $7 million, to rent premises inside the complex. All of it denied, all of it disputed. all of it behind a no-fly zone. Navalny himself never saw that footage. He died in an Arctic prison colony in February 2024. But deep in those 4 hours of video, in a grimy bathroom used by the construction workers, the camera catches a message scrawled on the wall above the toilet. Lyoka, the affectionate Russian nickname for Alexei. It reads, "Lyoka, you were right." So where does that leave the palace at Cape Idokopas? If that 100 billion ruble figure is anywhere near correct, this is one of the most expensive private homes ever built. In the same conversation as Mukesh Ambani's billion-dollar Antilia Tower in Mumbai, which I have shown you before. Buckingham Palace is valued at around $5 billion, but that is the working headquarters of a monarchy. This is, allegedly, one man's beach house. And here is the thought I will leave you with. Every other home I have ever featured on this channel has an owner who is proud of it. Antilia has a family living in the clouds. The great penthouses of New York have nameplates on the door. This palace, the biggest and possibly the priciest of them all, is the only one on Earth that everyone connected to it insists belongs to somebody else. The most expensive home in Russia is also the most disowned home on the planet. If you enjoyed this one, you will love my tour of Roman Abramovich's $1.5 billion super yacht. The link is on your screen, and if you want more stories from behind the velvet rope, you know what to do. I will see you in the next one.